Today is a very memorable day because actually somehow I didn't realize that exactly 9 years ago I was actually in Lower Manhattan in my office just across from the World Trade Center, where I had an office on the 77th floor just a few months before. And I still remember the time when I ran down Broadway, actually ran north, ran up Broadway, when the second building collapsed. And these were moments that can transform your life when you experience something like that. And today I will try to explain to you why even experiences that might not be always associated with something positive and with something inspiring can still change your life in a positive way. Let me start with a quote of one of my favorite thinkers. Einstein said, "Look deep into nature and then you will understand everything better." And this is exactly what I'd like to do with you today. I would like to look very deeply into nature and perhaps also into human nature. And I'd like to first propose to you the method that we are going to use to look into nature. So the way of scientific inquiry always works in a very specified way. You start with a model, you apply the model to your observations, and then you check if it works, you make experiments, you verify the model. And what I would like to get across today is that the kind of model that we choose to describe reality is actually the critical thing about it. Because if we choose a different model, our perception of reality automatically also changes, and therefore reality itself changes. Let's take this simple stocking stuffer, as the Americans would call it. We all know it's made of carbon, and we all know that the way it looks depends on what we call a molecular structure. So a molecular structure of carbon might look like something like this. And the scientists among you will know this is not coal. This kind of molecular structure of carbon, which happens to be exactly the same element as the piece of coal we just saw, is of course a diamond. And you see, the structure we just saw doesn't really exist. It's a model that we imposed, that we use to describe this phenomenon, this molecular structure of carbon. But nevertheless, the insight that we have, because we know the difference between this structure and the other structure, actually enables us to transform any kind of carbon into diamonds. That is technically possible. So I think there's an incredible and fascinating insight here, because we can actually, by the way we fashion our models of reality, we can change reality, we can create this world in a very tangible, in a very physical sense. So there's another molecule that you might know. It's called C60. And it's got the buckyball, the Buckminster fullerene for the scientists among you. And again, we have to remind ourselves that this doesn't really exist. And yet, if we abstract from reality and we see this creation, we are awed by its beauty and by its perfection. And I think in that also lies the inspiration of models. William James, the famous American psychologist of 2 centuries ago, said, it doesn't matter, well, he didn't say that, but he said, truth is simply what works. And this model is truth because it works. It is very efficient in describing carbon in this case. And so you see where I'm getting at. You know, we are here in Austria, so I have to refer to Karl Popper and his theory of scientific models, of scientific thinking, that really focuses on the underlying principle that there's no such thing as a true model or a true description of reality. Everything is only true for a certain period of time, and then until one day it might be falsified by a new theory. It's the falsifiability theory of science. And that is exactly the view we should have when we apply our models to reality. There's perhaps no absolute truth in them. Truth is what works. And indeed, a German, Swiss-German physicist who I like very much said that reality is actually merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. So even the greatest thinkers of the past century have agreed that the nature of reality is not necessarily absolute. So let me explain what implications that has. We all know, or perhaps more or less, how a light bulb works. And here we have a model of a light bulb. That's another model. And if you look at something as concrete as this, if we look at how much man has gained control over his physical environment through technology, how can we even doubt that the physical world is really constructed in the way we describe it? Because we can describe every detail of how a light bulb works. But we should ask the question, what actually enables us to construct such a thing as a light bulb? So to invent such a thing as electricity? Well, underlying is another model that describes a phenomenon that perhaps we only observed before. It's the Bohr model of the atom, right? With its protons, its electrons, and its neutrons. And the circulating electrons which have helped us invent electricity. And with electricity, we have developed it into industries, into computers, into our modern information society. It only comes from one simple model like this. And despite all this, apart from all these things, it had also created global warming. It has created international terrorism. It has created nuclear war. So the effect of these things can come in many, many forms. An American Jewish scientist who I revere very much has said, "It has become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity." And that is a danger that we should always be aware of. Looking at this model of an atom, actually this I find very inspiring because it somehow inspires you to look at the different, to invent new models to describe our world. You know, an atom is the smallest unit, atomos from Greek, and elements are made of atoms essentially. So what are the elements of another realm of our reality, perhaps the human realm? So if you look at this model, which is another model from perhaps a different culture, this is called wuxing. It's the 5 elements in Chinese, and it has lots of applications. It not only describes our physical world, the elements, and how they interact with each other, these colors, these arrows you see on this diagram, they all have, and it's all a system of interrelations. This is yet another model, and we can say, well, is it correct or is it wrong? Well, it works. It is still relevant and used today. It is used in medicine, it's used in nutrition, it's used in psychology, and it is alive and well. So as long as something is useful, we will continue to use it as a metaphor to describe what we perceive as reality. Now, interesting about this is that you can apply this to something that is actually vastly different from the scientific approach I took at the beginning to describe the physical world. And that is the beauty of it. You can actually extend it to different realms. And I would like to stress one point. The important thing in taking a new model to describe existing reality is because it enables us to do more things, to do new things. And you can do something with the wuxing model that you cannot do with the atom model. You can gain insights and then influence reality. So for example, if you take a more Western example for a human model, perhaps you have heard about the 4 temperaments and that you can actually describe human condition very well with these. Let me remind you of the opening sentence that we want to look deeper into nature and then we might understand everything better. Do you see how everything comes together, and that when we widen our horizon and actually peek beyond the physical world and into the what I would like to call the human universe, perhaps this is now the time that we move a little bit beyond the physicality. You know, when you see this, you might say, well, this is a sort of quaint, ancient model that doesn't really fit modern psychology anymore. And you're right, many models become old, according to Popper, and they stop working, or perhaps they are less relevant. But a scientist who I like very much and who used to work in the Swiss Patent Office, he said, if the facts don't fit the theory, change the facts. And this might sound cynical to you. But actually there's a great truth buried in these words. Because we should not forget, we would like to always find a new model of reality that actually empowers us to change it, to change reality. So let me again quote a well-known thinker of the last century, who said, to raise new questions, new possibilities, is to regard old problems from a new angle. That requires creative imagination and marks real advance in science. So it's not just the description of what is real, it is the imagination part that is really the difference, also in scientific advance. So my proposition today to you is to apply that model and to take that model and apply it to the human universe, not only to the physical science. And when we talk about the elements that make up the stuff of our world, we should also think about the elements that make up the human essence. And I think if we understand the building blocks of human nature, then perhaps we, as a group, as a TED audience, we can do the things better that we strive for, which is to make this planet a better place. So let me introduce to you a theory, a model of human nature. And I say there are 7 elements that are important. And all these 7 elements have one thing in common. They are potential. I say the element, the basic atom of human essence is human potential. There are 7 kinds of potentials. And we very simply derive at them by asking very simple questions. The first question you should ask yourself is, what do you have? And with what do you have, I mean physical things. I mean things in the real world that you need, that you can treasure, that perhaps are useless to you, but that you can give to other people because they might be useful for them. The second question you should ask yourself is, what can you do? And that regards your skills, your the things you have learned, but also the things perhaps you don't know so well. And many people say, well, I'm not so good at this, I'm not so good at that, and my firm conviction is that there's so much talent in every single one of us that with the words of a famous physicist, once we accept our limits, we can go beyond them. The third element is to ask the question what you have done. This is your experience. And I opened this talk, actually it wasn't planned, with a little anecdote from my life. This was an experience that perhaps wasn't such a good experience, but it has opened my mind and it has made me think about other things that I think ultimately perhaps did have a positive effect. One of the thinkers that I like said, there are 2 ways to live. You can live as if nothing is a miracle, or you can live as if everything is a miracle. Well, it is only appropriate for our times that we also talk about networks. So who do you know becomes increasingly important in a time when networks grow into 500 million people in very, very fast. So you can see this is a much more complex construct, because what is important here is that we talk again about the potential of these people, not just who we know and who knows that who we know. The 5th one, I would like to move from the supply side to the demand side of potential. So we'll extend the model into the future and we'll look at the motivational side. So I don't have to explain to this audience how useful it is to have concrete, realistic, tangible personal goals, and that those also constitute a large part of your potential. But that's not enough. I think it's also important that we know what we wish for. So our wishes, our dreams, and the word dream has been mentioned already quite often today, that is really what gets us beyond the mere goals. As a matter of fact, I don't have to tell you who said the following quote: "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it." So without dreams, we will just simply not get there. And finally, everybody has a vision, and not just the visionaries. Everybody has a vision of the future. And it is that vision of the future that might be remote in time, that actually ties all these things together. Actually, somebody I like said, the only reason for time is so that things don't happen at once. Okay, so here we have our model of human elements. And the last thing I would like to tell you today is that we, my partner and I, have found a way to actually link all these human potentials in a semantically driven, text-driven social network to actually intelligently link these things together. And perhaps you have heard about what is called the semantic web. It is a repository of information that links this information intelligently together. But I would like to remind you that these are all things that already exist on the internet today, and that one of the things that we found out is how to actually harness this human potential, how to codify it, how to collect it, how to put it into semantic units. This semantic network as it exists today is applied logic. And a physicist said, logic will get you from A to B. Imagination can take you everywhere. I would like to end with this beautiful image because it shows the old strife, from medieval times of man to go beyond the boundaries that he perceived. Here we can see a man who strives beyond the point where the earth touches the sky, and he sees the model behind that. Perhaps you think that's a little bit esoteric. Well, let me answer with a quote. All religions, art, and sciences are branches of the same tree. And finally, I don't have to tell you whose words these are. A human being is part of a whole, called by us universe. One part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest. A kind of optical delusion of his own consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires, to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in all its beauty. Thank you very much.